if you're a producer, an executive producer, or a writer trying to get something off the ground, film is a complex business. If you write novels, then theoretically you could work with a pencil and paper, and create your whatever work you're working on that way. With film, I mean, even inexpensive films are hundreds of thousands of dollars. Television series are way more than that, and they involve many, many people, and you have to be able to convince whomever you're pitching to, if I can dangle my preposition, to accept your idea and be prepared to invest money and time and resources in the production of that film. And typically for me, that's been broadcasters. And it's a frustrating process. I mean, I found out over my career that you had to develop roughly 10 properties for every one you got off the ground. I mean, my many years in the business is littered with projects that were very good projects, solid projects, things that I am confident people would like to watch. And across the full panoply of animated kids series, documentaries, drama, and so many of them ended up in in boxed files in storage, to ultimately be jettisoned entirely. And so then even within a project, as you'll know from the work that we did together, as you start to work on a project, you assemble a finance plan. You start thinking, where am I going to get the money to make this? Where am I going to find the $1 million or the several $100,000 or even in some cases the $10 million to make this? And you start looking, you start putting in the incentives that are available in Canada, in Ontario, in my case. You start adding, potential commissions from broadcasters. You start looking at co-productions and where the money can come from. And the first project I ever executive produced, a 26 episode series called Toad Patrol, we did 101. I did 101 finance plans before that finally got made. We tried all kinds of different things, different co-producers in different countries. We were at the point once, we were just about there with a Spanish co-producer. And all of a sudden the turbot wars blew up. I don't know whether you're old enough to remember that, or you're probably old enough, but this was Spanish fishermen were fishing too close to the Grand Banks, for turbot. And it created a great international incident, particularly when the Canadian Coast Guard fired across the vessels of a Spanish trawler, fired across the bows, of a Spanish trawler. And so all relations between Canada and Spain were suspended at that point, including the co-production agreement under which we were operating. So, at that point, several years of work going into developing this relationship with Spain, pitching people, working with people over there, all of a sudden, it was dead. And so we had to find another way. And ultimately we did. But so as I say, you if you want to be in this business, you have to accept the fact that you're going to be rejected over and over and over again. And as I said, that's at the level of project, but you can't help but interpret it sometimes as being personal, and sometimes it is. And I remember one programmer from a Canadian network who will go unnamed at this point, the programmer and the network, meeting with a colleague of mine at the company, where I was working at the time. I was a shareholder there and executive producing most of their productions. Good idea. And we met this person in a bar in the Majestic Hotel in the morning 10 o'clock in the morning. She'd evidently been out drinking the night before, was sitting there sort of, pasty foreheaded at 10 in the morning, looking around saying, can you get a drink here at this point? And then, she sat there for a minute, and then she said, "You're going to need to follow me now because I've got to get to my next meeting." We'd been there for all of 10 minutes. And she picked up a bunch of shopping bags, and I said, "Oh, have you been shopping?" And she said, "Oh, it's from my producers. My producers know me, and they know what I like." So there was even that kind of thing, where it's not so much a personal rejection. It's, you haven't done what I need you to do for me, and which is, so rejection, yes. And rejection and brick walls, where you just think, what the heck do I do now? Where you just encounter these impediments. And as I probably, taught you, as I was taught by somebody, if as a producer you encounter a brick wall, you have to find your way over it, around it, under it, or straight through it, if that's what it takes, without breaking the law, because there are many people who particularly at that time, were finding their way around these walls by, entering into fraudulent relationships, misrepresenting who was writing projects. There was, the company CNR in Montreal ultimately folded because they were regularly hiring American writers for their shows as their American clients required, and then hiring Canadian writers who would put their names on the projects and were silent about their lack of involvement until it was all discovered.
Well, that was scandalous because that was Caillou, right?
Yeah, that was one of them. Yeah, I think it was Harry Cohen, the head of Columbia at one point, who said, "You're only as good as your last picture." And so you may have early success, and lots of people do, and they end up, selling insurance or something, or televisions, because they can never get another one off the ground, or they do a second one and it's a dud, and that's sad. It's there's not a lot of margin for error in this business, or margin. But if you're persistent, and persistence, I think ultimately pays off, and it's a tough business. The only regret I'm finding now is that, as I'm working away on various projects, including the development of international financing software, using artificial intelligence, I'm finding that there are holes in my knowledge of the production process itself. The business side, I feel solid on, but the production process, occasionally, I'm exposed for the imposter that I am on that front. There's shit I should know that I don't know, that perhaps had I gotten into Algonquin College's film production program, I would have learned. Of course I know quite a bit about a lot of that stuff, but I couldn't hold a camera the right way up. I can budget productions, but there's stuff I don't know. And I wish I'd had time somewhere along the line to be more deeply involved in the actual physical production part of the shows that I executive produced, and also more in the creative part, because that's one thing that I see now. There are times when I deferred, and there are a lot of people who would find this unpopular, but there are times when I deferred to some of the creative people around me. And I feel if I had stuck to my guns a bit and perhaps argued the points further, the films or television programs would have been better. That would have been potentially more successful and would have allowed everybody to continue doing more of the same. And I just think that experience has now taught me that some of my instincts were correct, and I should have held my ground. But at the time, and again, partially as a result of that imposter syndrome, I thought, more about that than I do. And certainly on a production level, they do, and they did, and on even on most aspects of the creative process. But what I did have, and still have, is a pretty darn good sense of the marketplace, and what can work, and what is going to have difficulty working, and that's something that I think I could. So I'm about to start working on projects for I've already done one. But working with an Italian producer on a couple of documentary series, where that's precisely what he's looking to me for, is to help position these for greater success in the marketplace.
I don't think most people today would actually understand or even realize just how much money a broadcaster was giving per episode.
Oh, it was unbelievable. I can remember. I'm using the dollar terms, of the years in question. I'm not sort of calculating the net present value of those dollars, but that was very much the case. You before anything else, you could walk into your domestic broadcaster, pitch a project verbally. You might have a one-page document. And you knew the people, and you went in and pitched them, and if they liked it, if they felt confident in you, you would do the deal right there on the back of an envelope, proverbially, I remember I executive produced a series called The Mole Sisters, a series of preschool, an animated series based on a Canadian children's book series. And I can remember going in, at that time, the company of which I was a part, was also partially owned by Universal. And so we operated out of the Universal booth at MIP TV and MIPCOM in Cannes, overlooking the Mediterranean and so on. It was a great privilege to be there. But I can remember this programmer for one of the major children's networks coming to see me, and I'd already sent her the books and a pitch. And she walked into we had offices in this stand that we could use, and we walked in, and she said, "Let's shut the door." I was asking for development money at that point. She said, "Let's shut the door. I'm going to give you $90,000 an 11-minute episode for this. And I want to go straight to production. I want to leapfrog over development. I want to do this. I don't want, and if you're prepared to accept that, please don't talk to anybody else. Let's just do this." And we did. And I remember when I first got involved in the business side, my then boss, having relationships with the key people at CTV, CBC, and so on. And he'd go to Toronto and get, a license fee of $400,000 for a 1-hour animated special. And between that and the tax credits that existed at that time, at that point, was it tax credits, or was it the tax shelter system that pre-existed it? I don't remember exactly, but that would be it. You might need a little distribution advance to close the circle. And that was done. Next to impossible now. It very rarely happens, except in the case of the big streamers, who can come in and fully fund your project and pay you effectively a service fee for making it. But you have little or no rights that you retain, no residual value in the production. And in a way, it's that lack of residual value that the American writers and actors are currently on strike about. That's one of the big issues. Absolutely, but that's from the perspective of the consumer. The streamers coming in meant that there were budgets for productions that you never would have seen before, or very, very rarely. I mean, millions of dollars per episode in many instances. That only the streamers who take all rights can afford to put up. And so what we're seeing, and you're seeing the migration of so many faces from, the film side, from the theatrical film world into either feature films released by the streamers or television series released by the streamers. So the talent has migrated to those productions as well. And as a consumer, yeah, I mean, the quality of stuff that we're seeing eclipses an awful lot that was made over the preceding generations. I mean, it's just never were there budgets of that type for most television programming, and so in that sense, it is a golden age. I mean, I've enjoyed so much of what I've watched that it's it really is a golden age in that sense, and of television, and but those shows, and to some extent, some of the networks, in order to compete, have had to step up and engage in doing some of these these types of things as well. But but yeah, I mean, it's largely because of the money that's been brought to the table, and also because of the migration of talent from the film industry. So you've got, television 1 hour episodes that look like something that you would only have seen in the cinema years ago. No question. And speaking beyond Canada, because I'm working internationally now, the same is true everywhere. And some medium-sized companies are getting work being effectively service producers for streamers, and they might be busy rolling over from one production to another, but they own nothing. Big example right now is you see Ottawa companies that have done extremely well service producing, films and television programs here in Ottawa for the various streamers. All of a sudden, there's the double strike in Hollywood, and their business is grinding to a halt. Now they've probably built up some capital reserves from the fees they've made doing that. It's not the same as if they'd owned the rights to those things and had money coming in from around the world. If they had enough proprietary production, it wouldn't be the same. So that's and I hear, I do a lot of work with Australia, and I hear in Australia that complaint. It's that medium-sized companies are becoming service producers for the streamers, and they're not seeing the residuals that they once did, and those residuals, help people grow their companies, help people reinvest in future productions, and future productions. I mean, speaking from a cultural perspective, it's not just a question of telling stories; it's a question of telling our stories, and that's so important. I don't know what the figures are now, but I used to beat my drum loudly. I would go down a couple of times a year to lecture in the U.S. at a couple of universities about Canadian cinema back when I was at the Canadian Film Institute. And at that time, and it hasn't changed much, 3% of the screen time in Canadian cinema. So if you look at every multiplex across the country and the various slots, 2 or 4 or whatever shows per day, and looked at the number of those slots that were taken up with Canadian productions, it was around 3% perpetually, and I don't think it's a whole lot bigger now. Particularly sitting here where we are, just across a border from the U.S. It's true everywhere, but it's particularly important for us where our cultures are different, but there are enough similarities that you can be watching American programming and you don't realize, it's a different world. And, in Canada, there are many things. God knows we've made mistakes as a country. But there are many things that we hold near and dear: gun laws, healthcare, et cetera. And Canada is something worth preserving, in my view. And it's far easier to believe in a country in which people, for the most part, believe in some sense. Particularly in opposition to the United States. But if you never see yourself on the screen, then you're not seeing yourself reflected. It's not contributing to the sense of identity that a country, can feel. I can remember years ago doing a lot of work with Finland when I was a programmer. And Finland, a country of 5 million people, more or less, then and probably still now, had a pretty vibrant film industry, and people, and a much higher proportion of their screen time, almost half, was domestically produced films. So people were seeing themselves reflected back, and it really goes a long ways to creating an identity, and to exploring the issues that American producers just have no interest in exploring, that relate to, in this case, Canada, in other cases, other countries. And I can remember seeing a Quebec film called L'Hiver Bleu in the 70s, probably, maybe 80s, that was shot in Rouyn-Noranda, which was 50 miles from my hometown of Kirkland Lake. And apart from the fact that it was a different language and a somewhat different culture, it was a mining town. It was winter. It felt so much like what I grew up with. And it was the first time I had ever seen anything that where my reality was being reflected back at me. It doesn't happen very often for Canadian viewers. American viewers get it all the time and don't even know that they're, that's just the world as far as they know.
Did you feel at any point when you saw the financial model start to change, that you kind of wanted to get out of this business altogether?
Not right away. And ultimately, I found that just, one of the problems is, and I used to call it seller's remorse. We talked about the challenges of getting a project financed. And with each new element of financing, you'd land on the project. I remember sometimes just elevating myself out of my chair when you'd sell it, or you'd get the financing together. And that was just the most wonderful, heady experience that, you'd done it, you financed the show. And then all of a sudden you realize, now you got to make it. And particularly in long form animation, which I was doing, that's a 1.5 year, process. And in some of the other projects, it's a long-term process. And there are so many train wrecks that can occur, when you're doing a multi-episode series. Something happens on episode 4, and it's going to affect your delivery on episode 26. And so and I'm not, there was a certain point where I thought, I'm ready to stop doing that. I'm ready to get involved more on the front end, help shows get financed, help shows get created, and then, leave the producing now to somebody else. Cause, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of restless nights. And the whole process, from financing through to final delivery, is a lot of restless nights. And even once they're finished, you've incorporated sole purpose production companies for each of these productions, and they have a half-life of, decades in some cases, where you can, you can be finished it, but you're still looking at financial reporting for them and, tax returns and it's a long, so, a producer's job, begins when something is just an idea and continues for decades potentially after the thing is delivered. And sometimes you're making doodly squat, for it all. Good question. Because of the highs of, of recognizing a good property, of beating your head against the wall, until you get it financed, get it into production, finishing it, delivering it, having it be modestly successful, even, getting good reviews. It's and we talked about the horses in a race. Sometimes then among the productions you get off the ground, let's say you get 10 productions off the ground, you're hoping that one of them hits it, that one of them becomes, a household name. Didn't happen to me, at least not for very long. And that, and it becomes a brand that lives in the hearts of viewers forever. And that the ancillary revenues are, churning out fat, checks until your descendants are gone, that's not why I ever did it, but you get this feeling of you see something, you think this could really work, and just the thrill of getting it off the ground and seeing it made is And I remember at one point looking through some industry guide or something, and series that were in production somewhere, and and I just saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What the, and I mean,
Who knew?
who knew? Who knew? And some things just seem to click, and it's not necessarily by accident. Sometimes I think it's just good luck, but and particularly, well, I don't know. I mean, now so many production companies, or many production companies, have been acquired by other companies. You think of Boat Rocker here in Canada, that's acquired a number of production companies and so on, and they apply all of the focus testing techniques and so on, to try and I'm not talking about Boat Rocker in particular, but the larger companies, Chorus, applying all of the techniques that they can bring to bear on ensuring the ultimate success of these things. And I honestly don't know whether that makes a difference or not. Sometimes it really is just shit luck, that somehow you can take credit for anticipating industry demand, but you might not have known it when you started. I mean, I have very good friends up north who have articulated the same kinds of arguments that he was describing, and I have tried to counter them. This is very interesting for me to hear and hear. So, I mean, as I say, I hear people making exactly those kinds of comments. How assimilation and integration is sort of the answer. And I feel sometimes alone in the wilderness trying to argue against it. Not as alone in the wilderness as Indigenous people do, but I mean, this is useful for me just this much as a tool, as I try to counter some of that. So, and it's, and I when I say counter it, I'm not Indigenous, but I when I can, I like to try and put the record as straight as I can, recognizing there's some limitations in terms of how I might do that. But that was, I've heard every one of those things that he was saying.
What do you think about the some of the prejudices that you generally hear about Native people? Oh, we're alcoholics and so forth.
Okay, well,
we're on welfare.
There's answers for everything. I mean, why are we alcoholics?
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, when you look at First Nations and the statistics, we have the highest rates of alcoholism, we have the highest rates of suicide, we have the highest rates of drug abuse, and we have the highest rates of unemployment. But we're not getting the jobs, we're not getting riding the gravy train from the federal government. They say that we have jurisdiction over all of this crown land, and that we should enjoy it. And then you look at big companies like Irving, these are the real guys that are really enjoying the crown land and taking advantage of it. And we don't have the resources to actually get ourselves involved in in extracting the resources out of our land. Mm-hmm. And when you go, let's talk about fishing now. When you go upriver, there's $1 million pool, there's the American camp, there's the Irving camp, there's all these rich people that come and fish. And then the government on one side of the mouth says, okay, we recognize the Supreme Court decision. Natives have the right to hunt and fish anywhere you want. Try going upriver and fishing the $1 million pool. You can't. You get harassed. And then when they harass you, you try to press charges on them, and nothing happens. These people are untouchable. It's money. So, we want to have a piece of the pie. We do have a piece of the pie, but what we're getting is spoiled. We're not. It's like Elijah Harper said. We're administering our own misery with self-government. The natives cried for self-government, and we got it. And the federal government gave up fiduciary responsibility, and now they don't want to live up to anything. They want to just hand us money, spoil us, give people houses that they have housing programs. I've seen a girl dropped out of high school, pregnant, get a house. I mean, what kind of, what does that say for, here you go, drop out of high school, get pregnant, and you'll get a house. That's not a good message for other young people. We should be encouraging work. Like years ago in the 60s and 70s, my father, your father, his parents, we would go to the States and work, ironwork and construction, and the young men would have to leave because we had nothing here. In those times, we had nothing more than a welfare check. You couldn't get a job. You couldn't find work. You had to go to the land of the opportunity, the land of the free and the home of the brave to get a job. But people worked. There was a work ethic. You really earned your day's wages. Now, a few years back, a friend of mine and I, we were sitting at break time, talking about our friends. None of them want to come down to the States. None of them want to work. They get out of high school, they get a welfare check, and they live the easy life, maybe a free house, that they pay $300 a month on, and get some welfare, and then they don't have to work. It's like we're feeding our own laziness. We're producing lazy people, and so when people do say natives are lazy, in a way, it's true, but it's not because a biological. It's how the society is affecting us. There are some lazy natives. It's true. There's lazy white people. There's lazy Chinamen. There's lazy anyone. Lazy Frenchmen. It's across the board. But our system here, we're kind of we're supporting it, or we're nurturing a lazy environment. That's how I feel about when I work. I've been on unemployment, but every time I've been on unemployment, I've either been taking training or just like in between jobs. I've never really been on an extended period, I get my 14 weeks and then just stop working and live off of unemployment. I mean, that's the system that a lot of people get caught up in. And then, okay, now you're on unemployment, you're not working. What are you going to do? You're going to become an alcoholic. You're going to get drunk. We need something here, like in industry, to get, there are workers here, but we're not nurturing. We're not making an environment that nurtures workers. We're subsiding on 14 weeks a year, and then the unemployment that the masses of the working people pay, and look at us look at people that are on unemployment with disdain, and they're discouraged. All these people, seasonal workers. They don't make. I work 5 years and I pay my unemployment. I never collect it. I'm a worker. Well, try doing seasonal work.
If the Listigus government or the future leadership actually went to the government and said, the solutions to our problems are financial. We need another, let's say, $10 million to help our people. Would you trust your government with that money?
Ooh, that's hard. The government that's in now?
Any government, and the future government. Do they need government now then?
The problem with our government now is that we're in a system where, like at election time, like it is now, they want to give away stuff to get votes, to stay in, to keep their $900 job. They want to keep people voting for them, but they can't do that without giving stuff away. My fiancée is a counselor. She's in charge of housing. She works. She makes $900 a week. But for example, they got a stimulus package that came in. They got approved. Now the counselors are licking their lips and they want to give it away so bad. And my woman is saying, no, we're not going to give it away until after the election. Why would we give it away now? Because people are going to end up, people that don't really need the stimulus. They want a dream kitchen or a new whatever. They're gonna get it, and the people that really need it, that have leaking basements and that people that are living in mold, that this is what the stimulus package is for, to help these people, and not give away campaign promises. And you have the biggest family, I'm going to give you a new kitchen, vote for me, and get your family to vote for me. I wouldn't for that $10 million. I wouldn't trust the government with it now. Well, if it's my woman, I guess I would have to. She's pretty straight and honest, and you could talk to her. You should talk to her. She'll talk to you. She'll tell you anything you ask her. She can tell you straight out. She might be a little camera shy, but
are we ready for self-government?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we are ready for self-government. In order, I heard a famous quote, and right now there's too much division in our community. When you look back to like I think in '99, the community was so divided that the election came down to one vote. It was a one vote difference between chiefs. That's how divided the community was. And right now we're not together. In order to have a society, the society needs an enemy image, or like a binding force that they can all work against. Because hate is pretty strong, but it's a good motivator. And people need to believe in a cause. And right now we don't have any causes. All we have is a little piece of pie coming in from the government that the band office divides up, and whether it be political or they really need it. It's just people are not. I'm lost for words.
In Ottawa, the Assembly First Nations and all those guys their rallying cry. We need self-government. We need to handle our own resources, the monies that come in.
Well, that's when it comes to Elijah Harper. I'll never forget that self-government is we're administering our own misery, and those words make a lot of sense. It's we're not ready for it yet. We're not ready to. The rallying cry in Ottawa might be that, and I don't want to go back to the days where we have an Indian agent, and then he gives away all the stuff, because it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the Indian agent, giving contracts to his friend, and when work comes up, maybe we need an Indian agent to be the enemy image that will bring our society together. When they say how many billions that they're spending on our communities, how many trillions are coming out of the natural resources that we have, that we're supposed to enjoy? Ask them that. They say that we've made treaties that say that we have control over this land, that it's Mi'kmaq territory. From Nova Scotia to New Brunswick to the Gaspé Peninsula, it's Wabanaki. And we don't have any major forestry. Our fisheries, we were just given a fisheries 10 years ago. Before that, there was never any natives with licenses. And when you look at tobacco was invented by natives. How many natives have a license to sell tobacco on a scale that's matches de Maurier? Or any Imperial Tobacco, or all of these big companies? We don't get the money that they have works against us, and we're not getting anywhere near the money that they're making off of our resources, off of our natural resources. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So anybody in Ottawa that wants to talk about Indians getting too much money. As a matter of fact, our education, our kid that goes to school here is worth $5,000 a head. For some reason, the kid from the same town that goes to school in Campbellton is worth $9,450. That's how much the school gets per head. So, why would they spend almost half as much on a kid on the reserve and spend twice as much on a kid in town when we both come from the same area? And
why do you think that is?
Maybe they don't want us to get educated, so that we can't go to university. Maybe it's because we don't pay taxes, and they just can't. Maybe they want to keep us down. They're afraid of intelligent natives. Who knows what the motives are? But it's you'd have to ask the Minister of Education why, or the Department of Indian Affairs, why they only give $5,000 a head for a student in Restigouche, and then the same student goes to Campbellton and they give the school almost $10,000, just short of $10,000. Why? There's who knows why? What are they afraid? Are they afraid of us becoming intelligent and taking over? Learning about the laws that our forefathers made, and starting to assert them? Are they afraid that we're going to assert our laws? Because I went upriver a couple of years ago and I started asserting my right to fish, and I was harassed by DFO, RCMP, and fishing guides that have no right to harass me.
Wow. The first one was more what I expected to hear. The second one I found a bit jarring in the sense that I didn't expect that kind of perspective from within an Indigenous community. I didn't, and I sort of, I can't judge anybody, but I listened to the second fellow. He has worked in the United States. He's worked within the sort of the colonizer's system for a long time, from the sounds of it. Nothing wrong with that, but does that color? Of course it would color his approach and the values that he's internalized. And again, I can't criticize him for that. You do what you do, and and everybody. But I'm just wondering how representative his opinions and beliefs might be of Indigenous people generally, whether there is that sense of hesitation or caution or even negativity towards self-government, towards what he described as handouts. But it's. I mean, again, it's not up to me to prescribe for anybody what their beliefs should be and what's right and wrong. There's no right and wrong. But but it was very interesting, and I'm just wondering. And I'm not interviewing you; you're interviewing me. But I'm wondering whether that is a common sentiment. I mean, I'm aware, certainly, with the firing of Roseanne Archibald and so on and so forth. I mean, it's obviously there are difficulties, there are problems in Indigenous governance generally, but I don't think we can point fingers, and I don't think it's right to say, get your house in order, and then we'll support you. It needs to be, I'm speaking from our perspective now. I think it's important that we ours, the European Canadian perspective. To be supportive how one handles the issues of misgovernance, the issues of corruption and so on, when it's every taxpayer's money that you're using is obviously a sensitive issue. And there's certainly a lot of taxpayers who think that this is not somewhere that their hard-earned money should go, and who cleave to those ideas, in terms of as were articulated by both people. It's a very complex set of issues, and it's I don't have an answer. I mean, I don't know who does. I think the honesty of what you're doing and the honesty of the people who are speaking is very important. It's acknowledging some of the acknowledging the stereotypical thinking that a lot of Canadians express when talking about Indigenous people, and not simply acknowledging it in some cases, as with the last fellow, acknowledging that there may be good reasons for some of that, but it's he seemed, I guess my question would be, is how common is his viewpoint in Indigenous communities? Because he spoke from a very contemporary and personal perspective. Didn't hear much from him, I don't think, unless I'm misremembering, about the historical issues that underlie the situation that the first fellow was talking about. But again, listening to him, in as much as, and that's probably why you showed me the two of them together, in as much as the first person recounted this, the things that it sounds like I have a lot, first of all, it sounds like I have a lot of friends. I don't necessarily have a lot of friends, and there aren't that many that I've spoken to about these issues. But the second guy, was certainly amplifying some of the things that you would hear by way of criticism, and saying, well, there's in some instances there are, good reasons for that I'm faced probably with more questions than I have, answers or observations. I look at the issue of self-government, and it's certainly not up to me to decide or even opine on the failings of self-government where they occur, and obviously in some instances they do. On the other hand, how do you get past where we are now without self-government and without the hiccups and missteps that might occur along the way? Not every, God, you look at the failings of democracy, in the world now, and particularly in the US, is it right to point a finger at the missteps of certain First Nations governance systems, self-governance systems? Should we be throwing the baby out with the bathwater, I guess, is while some First Nations administrators, that have clearly padded their own pockets in some instances, where, there's been some evidence of corruption. There's been, his story about the pregnant girl, the grade 12 education, getting a house, and that's not the way it is anywhere else. All true. But if that young girl gets a house, will her child or children be raised in a situation that gives them a better array of possibilities, a better image of themselves than somebody who's raised in a mold-infested, overcrowded home? I mean, it's not easy. It's not, it's a tough one. If Indigenous people had been left to their own devices from the very beginning, and if their resources hadn't been co-opted, stolen, or if treaties had been honored, things might be radically different. And would we be seeing the same levels of alcoholism and drug addiction and suicide had that been the case? Very likely not. So if you look at a response of the Canadian government, I think the responsibility is there to support self-government and compensation for what's been lost, and not necessarily to look for 100% success, right out of the gate. I mean, a lot, things are changing, things are evolving, and are there going to be screw ups? Sorry, my eyes are watering for some reason. Are there going to be screw ups? Of course there are, but we live in glass houses, and we're not doing such a great job of running our own jurisdictions either. Well, and for every one of us, it's a psychology of being me in this equation, in this issue. I mean, you're coming at it from a far different perspective than I am, and your life has been affected by it, by these issues in ways that mine hasn't been. But for all of us, it's part of our individual psychologies, how we react to this. And these are personal questions for every single one of us. And I think approaching it from that sort of atomistic level of sort of individual psychologies. I remember taking social psychologies when I was studying sociology at university, and obviously social forces are comprised of millions of individual psychologies that sometimes move in concert and sometimes don't. You can't help but watch these sorts of things and learn things about the deaths of all of those children. Not just the deaths, but the abuse that all of those children suffered in residential school, and the horrors. Without it affecting your own psychology and the way that you approach these issues. To digress for a minute, I'm working on a project on orphans during the Holocaust, And one of the things that we were thinking about is how do we approach this? And we realized we need to be approaching mothers in particular to react to these stories as mothers, in contemporary mothers, trying to put them in the situation of, for example, one of the mothers in one of our stories, the true story of one of our survivors when he was just turned 4 years old, standing in a street in Antwerp with his mother, and the Nazi, the Belgian arm of the Nazi police was coming down the street arresting the adults. Kids were not yet being arrested. And the mother, realizing what happened, turned to her 4-year-old son and said, I want you to turn around. I want you to run as fast as you can. Keep running. Don't look back. That was the last time he ever saw her. And stories like that have a way of, you need to be able to affect people's hearts. And there are so many similar stories in the cases of kids that were arrested from their parents, and taken to residential schools, of the pain and experienced by those kids in the residential schools, separated from their parents, separated in some cases from siblings, abused in unimaginable ways, devalued, and it's only by appreciating those things on a very human level and recognizing the intergenerational impact of things like that, like the Holocaust. I mean, it affected the one generation, and that generation was so damaged by that experience that they don't know how to love, how to parent, how to and particularly with the other social issues that were that surrounded them, lack of work, lack of whatever. If people think of Indigenous people as drunks, it may help to think a little bit about why.